The attorney shook his head in doubtful incredulity, again unconsciously following Editor Kendall's lead. " It does n't seem possible," he protested. " Think of the tremendous consequence involved, outside of the crippling of the railroad. The short line would n't be the only sufferer in case of a dam break in the Mesquite. The entire valley would be flood swept, and our High Line Dam " He stopped abruptly and half rose to his feet. " Good Lord, Sprague, the breaking of the High Line Dam would mean death and destruction without end." Sprague had found a cigar in an overlooked pocket, and was calmly lighting it. Though he did not tell Stillings so, the argument had finally gotten around into the field toward which he had been pushing it from the first. " 3 days ago your High Line treasurer, Mr. J. Montague Smith, declared in the presence of witnesses it was right here in this hotel lobby, and I happened to overhear it that a 10-foot rise in the river, which, as you know, would submerge and sweep away miles of the railroad track in the canyon, would by no means endanger his dam. There you are, Mr. Stillings. Now fish or cut bait." " Great Scott, what could Smith have been thinking of ?" ejaculated the lawyer. " It was merely a bit of loyal brag, as he admitted to Starbuck and me on the train this afternoon, and it had been craftily provoked by one of the men who heard it. But he said it, and what is more, he said it to Jennings." This time the attorney's start carried him out of his chair and stood him upon his feet. " I shall have to see Smith at once," he said hurriedly. " Still, I can't believe that these New York stock pirates would authorize any such murderous thing as this." " Authorize murder or violence ? Of course not. Big business never does that. But what it does is to put a man into the field, telling him, in general terms, the end that is to be accomplished. The head pushers would turn blue under their finger nails if you charged them with murder." " But that is what it would amount to, cold blooded murder." " Hold on a minute," objected Sprague. " Let s apply a little scientific reasoning. Suppose this thing has been accurately figured out, engineering wise. Suppose that, by careful computation, it has been found that a certain quantity of water, turned loose at the mouth of Mesquite Valley, would produce a flood of a certain height in the full length of Timimani Canon, say 10 or 12 feet, sufficient to obliterate 35 or 40 miles of the railroad track. Below its path of the greatest destruction it comes out into your High Line Reservoir Lake, with some miles farther to go, and a greatly enlarged area over which to diffuse itself." Stillings was nodding intelligence. " I 'm beginning to see," he said. " 10 feet in the canyon would n't necessarily mean 10 feet at Smith's dam." " No ; but at the same time Smith is on record as having said that 10 feet would n't endanger his dam or the power plant. So there you are again." Stillings walked the length of the alcove twice, with his head down and his hands in his pockets, before he stopped in front of the expert to say, " You have half convinced me, Mr. Sprague. If we could get the barest shred of evidence that these people are building a dam which is n't intended to hold." " There spoke the lawyer again," laughed Sprague. " If you had the evidence, what would you do ?"" Institute legal proceedings at once." "And how long would it take to get action?" " Oh, that would depend upon the nature of the evidence I had to offer, of course." Sprague laughed again, derisively this time. " Yes, I thought so. And while you were getting out your wits and monkeying around, do you know what that piece of canyon track cost, Mr. Stillings? I was told to day that $3,000,000 would n't replace it, to say nothing of what it would mean to the railroad company to have its through line put out of business indefinitely. No, if we mean to " The interruption was the intrusion into the alcove of a huge framed, hard faced man, who was fumbling in his pocket for a paper. " Hello, Harding," said Stillings. And then, jokingly, " What brings the respected sheriff of Timimani County charging in upon us at this time of night?" " It s a warrant," said the sheriff, half in apology. And then, to Sprague, " I hate like the mischief to trouble you, Mr. Sprague, but duty 's duty." Sprague smiled up at the big man. " Tell us about it, Mr. Harding. You need n't bother to read the warrant." " It s that scrap you had with Jennings up at the Mesquite this morning. He swore out a warrant against you for assault and battery." " And are you going to lock me up over night? I fancy that is what he would like to have you do." " Not me," said the sheriff good naturedly. " I got Judge McFarland out of bed, and made him come down to his office. I m going to ask you to walk around there with me, just to let me out of it whole. I fixed it with the judge so you won t have to give bail." " I 11 go with you," Stillings offered. And a few minutes later, in the magistrate s office, the government man had bound himself, on his own recognizance, to appear in the court the next morning to answer the charge against him. On the sidewalk in front of the justice shop Stillings reverted to the still more pressing matter. " I m going to see Smith before I sleep, if I have to drive out to the Baldwin ranch to find him," he declared. " In the mean time, Mr. Spragg, if you can devise any scheme by which we can get a legal hold of these fellows, anything that will serve as an excuse for our asking that an injunction be issued." " That would come before Judge Watson, wouldn t it ?" Sprague broke in. " Yes." " See Kendall of the Tribune about that. From what he told me a couple of hours ago, I should say that your petition for an injunction would only be a crude loss of time. We 11 try to think of a better way, or at least a more effective way. Good night, and don't omit to throw the gaff into Smith, good and hard." End of Section 13, and end of Part 1 of The Cloudbursters.